Hello, everybody. Welcome back to MBA Protocol. We have a really special treat for you today. We have a Stanford mock interview with an extraordinary deferred candidate, Victor Wright. Victor, tell him about yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Victor Wright. Thank you for the great intro, Angela. I went to Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, graduated in 2023, and then I went to the University of the West of England, where I earned a Master's of Science in Financial Technology, and I currently live in Budapest, where I'm building a career in social entrepreneurship while also playing professional football.
I read your essays. I looked through your application. You have an exceptional candidacy.
Thank
I'm
you.
just really impressed with you, first of all, like who you
Thank
are,
you.
what you do. But I'm also your essays are amazing. You did an amazing job. Did you write them?
Thank you.
You didn't get any help? I mean, you must have had people
I had
giving you some feedback.
I had my aunt, she's a very good writer, so she just helped me edit. Like I wrote I guess a little bit of background on how I wrote approach these essays. I actually
Mhm.
thought I was going to have to apply for Stanford Deferred last year, but
Ah.
then I realized that my graduation date for my master's allowed me to apply in 2025. So I was like, oof, I have a whole year for this. So I had a
Mhm.
whole year to literally just think about my essays and think about my background and do a lot of introspection before I actually put pen to paper.
It shows, by the way, like when we work with our clients, we force that process of introspection because it makes such a difference. It just really allows you to express yourself with great clarity, and that
Hmm.
really showed in your essays.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll give you a question. I'll have you answer it,
Hmm.
and then we'll talk about it. And then
Okay.
we may do it again if we think if it's useful to do it again, we might do it again. And if not, we'll just keep going. Okay, so let's just start at the top. We're gonna pretend that I am the interviewer. When you're having a Zoom conversation, there may be like little bit of chit chat, like, "Hey, how's the weather?" or like,
Hmm.
"What's going on?" There may be some of that, but um, we're just gonna jump right in, and we're gonna say, "All right, Victor. So why don't you just start by telling me about yourself?"
Okay. So I think the most a few fundamental things to know about me and that have influenced my decisions so far in my life are my passions for activism, technology, and sports. I can start off with talking about my passion for activism, which was started when I moved to Florida with my grandfather at the age of 12. And when I moved with my grandfather, I moved to Southwest Florida, and our school district didn't have a Black History Month curriculum. And my grandfather was very, very upset about this at the time. And every day of every summer, he made me read for an hour books from African American authors like Michael Eric Dyson, James Baldwin, and 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐬 Jr. Really helped give me like a fundamental understanding of my history and the community and my ancestors helped me get to where I am today and also help me have access to the opportunities that are in place that are in front of me. And the key thing that I learned from these readings from these readings back in high school was that no progress that has been made within my community has been done by one sole leader. It's all been done as a product of a community of individuals who have been selfless enough to help others, but also use their careers and their opportunities to pay it forward to others. This is something I adopted and was really apparent in the way I approached my time at Macalester. At Macalester, I founded multiple student organizations oriented around helping make the campus a more inclusive environment for diverse students, following the campus's decision to go test optional. And then I also helped create more community space within the athletic department, and then also helping drive more community gathering on the campus through my BIPOCA, an organization I began, and the Men of Color Collective. So activism has been something that informed my time at Macalester, but also my career aspirations and career journey thus far. I've interned at the Do North Foundation, which was a nonprofit startup in the Twin Cities, where I helped lay the foundation for an incubator that helped minority entrepreneurs attempting to scale their companies. I'm sorry, who are attempting to scale their companies I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. Can I get a reset?
You're doing great, but I can kind of tell that you have something maybe that you've practiced or memorized
Oh,
here.
yes, I have something I'm thinking of. I'm trying to pull at it now.
Right, and that's never the right strategy because this will happen to you. You'll
Okay.
lose the train of thought and then you'll be like, "Wait, wait, wait.
Okay.
Start the tape over again." And of course, that can't happen in the interview. So
Yes.
so you're doing fine. I have loads of feedback for you, but you're doing great. So just keep
Okay.
going. Just finish the answer from here. Just say whatever you want to
Okay.
say. So you're talking about the startup, you're nurturing founders. Keep going.
Yeah, so we were helping startup founders who helping minority entrepreneurs in the food and beverage industry scale their business operations because most of them all wanted to help create generational wealth for themselves and for their families. And is very much related to my own background of realizing that I wanted to support my community and other underrepresented communities. So from there, my mission was to go into the financial space to help drive social mobility through innovation in that space. I got an internship at Capital One where I honed a lot of my technical skills and I really was able to dive into my interest for technology. But however, at Capital One, I realized that I wasn't able to build that technical skill set that I wanted, that the technical skill set necessary to help me later in my career launch a entrepreneurial venture that would allow me to help me to drive financial literacy and learn more about financial and wealth management. So I then decided to do a Master of Science in the United Kingdom, where I learned a lot about challenger banks in Europe. I learned a lot about the innovation that was taking place over there. And then I was also able to continue my athletic journey and play in England's Adult National League, which exposed me to a lot of different athletes who had thriving personal lives, were also able to have awesome careers at top firms like Ernst and Young, while also being great athletes. So it really gave me an exposure to a new way of life where I could bring all facets of myself into into this next step of my career and into my deferral path. I'm on a path towards social entrepreneurship where I'm currently living in Hungary, where I'm building an ed tech platform to help to help students in high school get access to the adequate guidance that they need to be competitive in the college admissions process, while also still being able to hold parts of myself, such as activism and sports, uh, in this next step of my journey. Oof.
Okay. Woo, we made it to the end. All right. So, first question for you is how long do you think that answer was?
Probably like 5 minutes.
Yeah, if we take out the little pause in the middle, it was like probably 5.5 or so
Yes.
minutes. Which is way too long. We definitely don't want your walk me through to be 5 minutes. We're gonna scale it back in just a minute. I kind of think rule of thumb 2 to 4 minutes is okay for the walk me through. The Stanford
Yeah.
interview, is it 45 minutes? How long did they tell you it would be?
45 to 60 minutes.
45 to 60 minutes. So in a 45 to 60-minute interview, a 5 minute walk me through is actually not a problem. It's probably okay. In a shorter interview, that you're eating up too much of the time. So anyway, we're gonna like hone it down in a minute. But my next question for you is how did that feel to you as you were answering the
Um,
question?
it felt disorganized.
Hmm.
And I will say it felt disorganized because I've been really struggling to figure out what do I want to highlight in
Right.
my tell me about yourself. I have
Exactly.
a lot of different aspects of my identity
Yep.
that I could introduce that might be intriguing to the interviewer. And I've just been like literally up until like 5 minutes before our call. I was literally working on my answer, trying to figure out
Yeah.
what
How
I'm
do
going to
I
say.
cram it all in? We have this MBA story quiz. It's a
Hmm.
new thing and you go in and you give a little bit of information about yourself and you get your MBA story archetype. I'll put the link in the description for those of you that are watching at home. And
Hmm.
you're the textbook octopus, which is like you've got like 8 arms because you're
Yeah.
doing all these different things.
Yep.
So good. So that's also my feedback for you. I think there are remnants of a couple of different frameworks, a couple of different ways of thinking about your life. There's a lot of details, some of which isn't necessary for the first opening moment.
Yes.
And to your point, I agree. It was like it wasn't focused enough. So you always kind of want to think, and this is why you need someone like me to mirror you, because you can't both be yourself and see yourself at the same time. And so the part about seeing yourself is I'm always looking when I'm coaching people on interviews, I'm looking at what am I left with? Okay? So if I just listen to that 5 minutes, what is the impression that I am left with about you? Like what's remaining? And what's remaining is, wow, dude's done a lot, but I'm not exactly sure what because
Mhm.
there was so much in there. So I don't I'm not left with like a clear distinct impression of who you are. So let's just start with that question. What is for you, what is the most important thing that you want to convey in any conversation about you where a decision is being made? What's the most important one or two things that you really want them to know about you?
I will say that my passion for driving social mobility isn't something that I'm just doing because it's
Mhm.
trendy. Social entrepreneurship is what
Yeah.
a lot of people in the industry are trying to get into.
Mhm.
And it's like a few years ago, ESG was a big wave. Now a lot of folks are interested in social entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I want to
Well, so
convey
don't
that.
get distracted by what it's not,
Yes.
because none of that
Mhm.
is you. What
Yes.
is you is like,
Hmm.
I am legit. This is my whole life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
My whole life is about helping other people.
Exactly.
And by the way, your interviewer will probably have read your essays because you're speaking to the director. They will have read your essays. So
Okay.
you can, that's not always true for Stanford, but in this case, it probably will be. So you can also reference your essays, which do a very good job of conveying that aspect
Hmm.
of who you are. So good. So I think that's really the core message. And then if there's a secondary message, I think it's related to sports and athletics. And so what does what does athletics mean to you that is separate from your activist work? Like what does it represent? What's the meaning behind it for you?
The meaning for athletics for me has really been the one space in my life that has been solely mine. Like
Mm.
my academic journey up until this point has been
Mhm.
about myself, but it has also been about the fact that my mother passed away from breast cancer, and in her final 6 months of life, she was trying to get her GED. So it was really about
Mm.
me making sure I fulfilled a mission for her, but then
Mm.
also setting a positive example for my siblings. And
Mhm.
then from there, and then a lot of things that I want to do in my career are very much oriented around helping a community,
Helping
giving
other
back to
people.
others. But
Yeah.
athletics is the one thing I really do for myself that's like this is for Victor. Like Victor loves
Mm.
playing football. Victor enjoys working out. Victor loves the team environment. So that's just
Cool.
one part of my life that
It's
feeds
like
me.
I could see it as like that's like your training ground. That's where you fill your cup so then you can go and do all the other things that you're doing.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. So I think you can construct an answer around those two things. And the way I always encourage people to think about the walk me through is to recognize that this is your first impression. So
Hmm.
in any interview, whether they've read your essays or your resume or they know anything about you or not, this is the first moment they're really getting to experience you.
Hmm.
And, it's either live in person or it's like live on a video camera. They're getting to experience you. So you want to open this conversation with like, own that moment. Don't think of it as a throwaway question. This is the moment where you're like, here's how this conversation's going to go down. And like
Hmm.
not in an aggressive way, but in a way of like really inspiring them.
Yep.
So I think if I were you, I might do, and I talk about a bunch of different walk me through your resume frameworks in my book. I don't think you need to worry about any of that. I'm going to give you an approach that I think will work, and then you can kind of play around with this yourself in between now and the interview and find the rhythm that works best for you. But I might start with something like, well, when you look at my resume, you're going to see two major themes. One is sports and athletics, and the other one is activism. And the first one, sports, it's like always been a part of my life. I'm currently playing professional football in Hungary. That's been a dream of mine. I love being part of a team. I love pushing my body. I love all the things that sports create for myself and for the world. And so that's something I've always pursued as a passion and will probably continue to have it be a big part of my life. But it's maybe like the side piece to the main event. It's like the trying to think of a good metaphor. It's the appetizer, and the main course of my life is really activism. And this is where you might say something like, if you read my essays, you know that I am very mindful of everything that it took for me, like, and that it took my community to get me to the position where I am today, where I have a master's degree and I'm able to be working on a social impact startup. And so it began, when my grandfather, was an activist, and he gave me a reading list at age 12 that began to cultivate my worldview and my perspective of like what I need to do um to like live true to these values. And so if you look at my resume, it's just kind of like a string of accomplishments related to trying to be an upstanding citizen in my community and to create opportunities for others. Everything from what I did in high school, example of what I did in high school, example of what I did in college, another example, what I'm doing now. So you kind of cram all the examples into this small space because it's all more of the same, right? It's like
Mhm.
any one of those achievements is emblematic, but if you stack them all up, it's like, whoa, he is serious. It's not
Yeah.
just a trend for him. And so you just put them all there and you say, and so um and that's really like, as I submit my candidacy for Stanford, like that's the path that I'm on, and that's my future, and that's why I'm applying to business school, is so that I can be an even better steward of that vision in the future in a variety of ways, something like that.
Okay, that makes sense.
What I did in this approach, so I included the two most important things. The
Mhm.
sports one is sort of like, it's important to me, but it's not that important to this conversation. So let me just put it out there for you to see, and then we'll put that aside. Now I want to talk to you about the most important thing. And then if this is a 2.5 minute answer, it's probably 2 minutes about activism, 30 seconds about sports. And what you're doing here in the model that I just presented is you're really taking up space as a professional. You're kind of coming to this conversation not as someone who is unsure of what he's supposed to say or what's the right answer. You're coming to the conversation as someone who's very clear about what he is and just wants to communicate that
Okay.
in an open and honest way. And so it's important to do it this way because since you're a deferred candidate, you're asking them to take a risk with you, right?
Yes.
You're not going to start for 2 or 3 years. So you're young and untested relative to full-time applicants. And so when you're in that position, you want to do everything that you can to show them that you're not a deferred applicant. You're ready now. You're a professional, serious careerist. You've had experiences, you're already a leader, you're ready to go to business school now. You're just going to wait a couple of years because there are other things that you're working on. And a lot of that will come across in how you choose to communicate.
Mhm.
And so that first answer, you want it to be, of course, you want it to be honest, you want it to be complete, you really want it to convey who you are in the most inspiring way. And um, you want it to ring as professionally succinct so that you're
Yes.
like, here's the bottom line, this is who I am, let's talk. And
Okay.
not any confrontation, but just like,
Mhm.
here, this is me, here I am, let's go.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So in this intro, is it necessary that I kind of, at least when I approach the essays, I was very thoughtful about threading
Hmm.
the needle between where I've been, what I'm doing,
Yeah,
where I'm going. Is that
right.
necessary for this answer? Because I was
No,
pretty
no, not at
open.
all. No, 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 because the good, I'm glad you asked that question. So remember I said this is the first impression, you want to own the moment, right?
Yep.
So a conversation and an essay are two different things. I mean, when you read something, you consume it, you understand it differently than when you're in a conversation. It's just a whole different vibe. There's a lot more information coming at me in a conversation. There's body language, there's eye contact, there's all that, there's your voice. That's all conveying a lot. And then there's the content of what you're saying, but we're speaking and we're not reading. So in the essay, it's like a narrative. You are like telling a tale, and you do
Yep.
need to connect all the dots because that is the task of an essay. But in a conversation, this is just the opening gambit. We're going to be talking for 45 minutes to an hour, and I'm going to be probing into all kinds of different questions about your life. And so I'm going to be, as the interviewer, I'm going to form this multi-dimensional picture of your character, not a linear one like an essay. And
Okay.
so your goal in this first question, it's not to tell the whole story, not at all. It's not to tell the whole story. It's not to regurgitate your essays. It's really just to make yourself known in the most simple and obvious way that is inspiring. And that's really the keynote for the interview.
Hmm.
You really want to inspire. You want to make a connection with your interviewer that's human, where they feel like they see you and they understand you. And you want to leave them with a positive emotion. And the most effective positive emotion in an interview is inspiration. And you have a
Hmm.
very inspiring life story. This shouldn't be hard at all. But
Yeah.
you have to convey it in a way that it lands over here. And so when you have a lot of information, when you're trying to connect all the dots, it actually runs counter to your purpose,
Yes.
as opposed to just being like, boom, here's who I am. And they're going to ask you a bunch more questions, right? It's not like this is the only question. It's just the opening gamut. It's just the thing that opens the door for curiosity and inspiration for me as the interviewer. So now I'm going to probe on different things and we're going to go to different places. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is very helpful.
Any other questions?
Um, so I was thinking about in your book you mentioned just talking about a little bit about your background. And I was
Mhm.
thinking about like which parts of my background do you think may be relevant to telling this story and which parts may not? Because of
So
course I want to talk about my grandfather's influence and my passion for activism, but I was also considering talking about how like sports is really important to me and rooting that in like to a lot of the responsibility I had as a kid.
let's keep going in the conversation because I think you're going to get the chance to show some of that in through
Okay.
other questions. But just remember that this first question is not meant to tell the whole story. It's
Yeah.
not meant to tell me very much at all. It's really
Mhm.
just meant to give me a first orientation to who
Perfect.
you are, how you communicate, like what's your vibe. Like that's really what this is about more than anything is just like what's the vibe here? What am I working with? That's what the interviewer will be thinking. And
Okay.
so the thing I would probably advise any deferred candidate not to do in this opening moment is make it too much about the distant past.
Okay.
Because the more you highlight your young life experiences, the more young you seem today.
Okay.
And that's the opposite of what you want.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, saying, like, my grandfather really inspired me by giving a reading list, and then it went from there. That's
Mhm.
okay because it's like that's the origin of it. But I don't, but if you get into the whole story about your grandfather, like, so, like, your first example talked about how he was upset about there wasn't a like it was about
Yeah.
your grandfather for a second.
Yeah.
And as touching as that is, think about it. This is a professional interaction. Is that really the first impression that you want to make on
Okay.
someone professionally? I think it's part of your story, but I don't think it's the first thing. The first
Yeah.
thing you want me to know is that you're a badass, that you're this like
Mhm.
very serious activist who's dedicated like countless hours to helping other people while
Mhm.
also, being a bruiser on the football field. Like that's really what you want to come
Yeah.
across because those are the things that's just like the introduction. That's the executive summary.
Okay.
And then we'll get deeper into your stories because we're going to get into some behavioral questions. And then you're going to really get the chance to tell some richer stories. So let's move into those. You'll find that in 45 minutes, you're really able to convey everything, even if all the details don't come across, all of your character will. It should.
Yes.
Stick around till the end so you can hear the revised version of the walk me through and what a difference a little bit of strategy makes. All right, so let's move on to the next question. What is something you're proud of?
I'd like to use this as an opportunity to talk about my experience co-founding a student organization at Macalester, if that's okay.
Sounds good?
So, for a little bit of context, I went to college at St. Paul at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, and we were located just 15 minutes away from where George Floyd lost his life. And this is relative to the conversation because just 10 months later, another young man lost his life in our city, and and there was a lot of civil unrest and protests that erupted in response to it. And this was back in my sophomore year of 2021. And this time I was a co-founder of BIPOCA, and we were trying to find a way to help give students an opportunity to help support this community in need while also being able to stay safe and also about being able to stay safe and also balance their academic responsibilities. And recognizing the fact that a lot of the protests and unfortunately some of the looting at the time caused all of the local businesses in the Brooklyn Center community to shut down and board up, we launched a community relief drive where we took resources from the city of St. Paul to the Brooklyn Center community to help the families outside of where all of the protests were happening that were facing food insecurity to still be able to have access to all of the food and essential goods that they needed for the day-to-day basis, because we didn't know when these local stores and groceries reopen. And one of the key challenges that we faced during this time was the fact that this was an extremely politically divisive issue at the time, where because we were an organization under the athletic department, a lot of the athletes at our university tended to be a bit more conservative than the rest of the campus. And in the early days of our work, it was really hard to get a lot of buy-in from the community to support our efforts. So we realized that we needed to try to depoliticize our efforts. And what effectively how we were able to depoliticize our efforts was through a speech that we gave during the halftime show of our football game, where we talked about how this was a community and people that were actually involved that needed our support at this time. And we made it a more about humanitarianism than it was about politics. And we went from being able to only fundraise maybe $1,000 in the first 2 to 3 days to, after this speech that I gave at the halftime show, we averaged probably at least $100 per hour of donations from there throughout the rest of this initiative. And the result of our efforts was the fact that we were able to take the resources that we had available to us in our city and deliver over $5,000 worth of food and essential goods to the doorsteps of all of these families that were in need. And we were also able to effectively ensure the safety of all of the student volunteers who decided to join us in this initiative by creating these protest safety kits that ensured that there were no injuries and no arrests on our watch. And I think the proudest moment that I had from this story was the fact that I was working in admissions at the time. A couple years later, I found myself working in admissions, and I read essays from students who cited the work of BIPOCA and our work in the community during this very politically emotional time as the reason why they wanted to come to Macalester, citing our work as citing our work as a demonstration of that Macalester was a space where students could actually get involved and do the work that they wanted to talk about and not just speak about it. So I'm really inspired to have helped the community, but also influenced the next generation of leaders who hope to have a positive impact in their communities.
Okay, fantastic. How long was that?
Probably 3 minutes, I don't know.
You lost track of time. It was 4 minutes and 15 seconds, that one.
Yeah.
Okay, it's sometimes a good sign when you lose track of time because you're like into the story. You're like really getting into it.
Mhm.
Okay, how did that feel to you as you were giving me that answer? How did you feel in the answer?
Felt a bit more relaxed. I think
Hmm.
probably because you and I have been talking for a bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little more relaxed.
Yeah, good. So that's something to notice is that the conversation gets easier. So
Mhm.
that first question is so important because it will
Yes.
be the hardest.
Yes.
So the more you can kind of like be ready with an inspiring answer, the better the whole conversation will go. So that's further sort of like fuel to prep a little bit extra for that first question.
Mhm.
Good. So in a behavioral question like this one, 4 minutes is actually a decent ballpark, I think. You're telling a full story here. This is an epic story, per the book, and 4 minutes I think is actually a decent benchmark. Um, my kind of highest level feedback for you on this question is that it was actually a decently solid response. I'm going to give you a couple of ways to slightly improve it, but I think if you had actually given that answer in an interview, I think it would have been a solid response. I don't think the interviewer would have come away thinking that, they didn't understand the answer, or that you did a bad job, or that you chose a bad example, or
Mhm.
that, you were incompetent. It was a good example. I think you chose a good story to tell, and I think you told it reasonably well. If we
Mhm.
want to enhance it, there's really just one key question that I'm going to ask you. And
Mhm.
that is, in the middle of all of that, so before the speech that changed
Mhm.
things around, what was your biggest challenge in the
Yeah.
middle of that experience?
I think my biggest challenge was twofold. It was managing my own responsibilities as a student athlete at the time. I was in the middle of track and field and I believe football season at this time. So I was playing
Mhm.
two sports, I think. It was in a remote environment. But
Mhm.
then also we were trying to figure out how we could create different mediums for our community to get involved with this resource drive.
So you slipped into we right there.
Okay.
So you
Sorry.
started with, I was balancing my schedule, and then we were dealing with. And so
Okay.
this was the major weakness of the story,
Okay.
is that in the critical moment in the middle of the story where you're telling me how the day was saved,
Yes.
it was all we.
Yes.
You even said we gave a speech,
Hmm.
which is nonsensical, right? Because one person gave a speech,
Okay.
right? It wasn't a bunch of people. Now this is, or maybe it was different people, but the point is, the interview question is really about you. It's not
Mm.
about the organization. So the we happens, and this is a really common pitfall. It happens when you're not crystal clear about your
Mhm.
role that you're trying to convey in the story.
Okay.
And so that's why I asked that question. So the first thing was balancing your schedule, and then what was the other challenge to you in this? So, like, let me ask a couple more follow-up questions. Were you the one who realized, hey, people are looking at this politically, we need to shift the conversation? Was that your insight?
Yes, it was an insight that I gave during one of our board meetings.
So you're in a board meeting, everybody's debating it, and you're like, I understand the issue, everybody. It's that they're thinking of this as political. We need to do something that's going to make them understand this is a humanitarian challenge, because
Mhm.
I believe that people care about people, and if they understand it's about people, that they'll donate.
Mhm.
That happened, right? That was your idea.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so good. So that already, if I'm the interviewer, that already shows me much more about you as a person than the story you told me, because it shows me that you're insightful, that you are an optimist, that you have the kind of courage to stand up and lead a mental shift for a whole community. Like, that's huge. But you personally were sort of buried in the we
Mhm.
in the middle of the story. So I couldn't tell, as I was listening to you the first time, well, what did Victor do versus what did the president do versus what did everybody, like, who did what in this story? So you always want to make sure that the person interviewing you can understand your specific role. Now, any achievement is a team achievement. So when you come back to the end, you're going to say, we managed to turn things around and get a lot of donations. Of course, the success is shared, but the challenge was yours and uniquely yours, and other people had their own challenges, but they're not
Mhm.
in the interview. So we only care about yours. So um so you had the insight. Did you also deliver the speech?
Yes, I gave the speech during halftime.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
And so you shifted into we, even though it was I gave the
Oh,
speech.
I spoke and then someone else spoke after me. So there
Multiple
were a
people
couple,
spoke. Got it.
yes.
Very
And the
good. Okay.
reason why I've been saying we because I had a very important role in it, but there were a lot
Mhm.
of other people. Like I couldn't have
Yeah.
done it by myself?
No, of course. I talk about this a lot when I'm talking about interviews. It's of course gracious to want to share a success.
Hmm.
And we all want that as human beings. The problem is, in an interview, when you try to share the success by talking about something that we did,
Hmm.
it has the opposite effect. It makes it seem like you might be taking credit for the work of others
Hmm.
because you're hiding yourself.
Okay.
So the thing you want to do here is you want to say, um, you know, I thought your setup was actually really good. You were like, our community was rocked. George Floyd happened down the street. Nobody had anything to eat. We had, I was running this organization. Here was how we decided we wanted to help. People weren't donating. And so at a board meeting, I realized The problem was the way the community was viewing the issue. It was supercharged politically. But I knew that if we could get people to see that this is a humanitarian issue, that they would look at it differently. So I proposed that at a game that we do a talk, that we give a speech and really inspire people to donate to their community members. And so I led the charge. I gave part of the speech. A couple other people stood up there. We made other shifts to the way the organization was oriented. And in the end, that was a turning point.
Yeah.
We managed to raise $100 an hour after that instead of $1,000 up until. So the success is shared. When you get to the end of the story, then you can bring back we. It's like, we did this, we accomplished that, as a team, we did this. And I loved the end point of your story, the moment of pride of
Mm-hmm.
like seeing how your work had affected people generations later in the student cycle. I thought that was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's just in that middle part where you're showing us the core conflict and how you overcame it,
Mm-hmm.
that you really want to focus in on yourself.
Okay.
And it's counterintuitive because of course you're like, it wasn't just me. I don't want to take credit for it. But the way to make a mental shift for yourself is, we don't care about we don't ca- when we ask questions about your past experiences, these behavioral questions, it's not so much about your success, it's about the struggle. That's the
Yeah.
part that we really care about. And so your struggle was uniquely yours. And there
Mm-hmm.
were other people on the team that were carrying other burdens, right? But each person is struggling with their part. And
Yeah.
that's what the question is about. And that's what the AdCom wants to know, because that's how they get to know you. Because of
Mm-hmm.
course your teammates aren't here. Like, they're not
Yes.
part of this conversation. Is that helpful?
Yes, it is.
Now, was this the story that you had prepared?
Yes, it was the story I prepared.
That was the one you prepared. Okay, good. So it was actually well done. So my
Thank you.
first comment was like, this would have worked, I think, in an
Mhm.
interview, but it'll be much stronger when you let the interviewer see the part that belongs to you.
Okay.
Okay. And I wanted to point out one other thing that you did at the beginning that I really liked, which is, you said, I'd like to use this opportunity to talk about something I did. Is that okay? And then you kind of like checked in with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's totally it's not necessary to do, but I actually think it's a great practice.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great thing to do because it makes it a bit more of a conversation. And then if the interviewer is looking for something else, they can be like, nah, tell me about something else. And then that works. Then that works too. Okay, cool. Shall we do another one?
Yes.
Okay. So remember, here's the key to answering these behavioral questions really efficiently. You want to home in on what was your core challenge in the story, and then just center the story around your core challenge and how you overcame it.
Okay.
Tell me about a time you created an environment that enabled others to grow and develop.
Okay. I can actually speak to an experience that I'm currently going through at the moment. I mentioned earlier in the interview, I'm playing professional football here in Hungary. And American football in general across Europe is a relatively young sport. Here in Hungary, I play on a team that's about 5 years old. So we have a lot of young players on the team. And one of the challenges that we have is that a lot of the players are very passionate about wanting to play American football, but there's not that strong institutional structure that we have in America where you might be playing from 5 years old all the way up until you're 18, 19 years old. So when I came and joined the team here in Hungary, a lot of the way the practice was structured, a lot of the way we approached our game day and our preparation was honestly a little bit disorganized. It wasn't because they didn't care about what they were doing. It's just honestly a lack of access to the way that other and teams and another and way that the sport was run back in the States, which allowed it to grow into the multi-billion-dollar enterprise that football is here in America. So this ultimately was stunting the growth of a lot of our players on the team. So recently, I've taken up a role as of like a defensive coordinator of our team, where I help prepare the practices for our teammates, while also running them through drills to help them learn fundamental skills to help them get better at the sport of football. And right now, there's this linebacker that I'm teaching. His name is Oliver, and he's a very young, promising linebacker, and he is going to America to play football this upcoming fall. So I've been making a very strong initiative right now to ensure that I can take the knowledge that I have about the way that American football is taught and played and the way that you should approach developing in it to translate that to this new environment of people who want to learn about the sport and who really want to grow into it. So I've really just been able to come into an environment where there's a lot of a lacking structure around how the sport is approached and practiced and help share my insights and help other players develop. And I've seen players who couldn't necessarily tackle, make open field, who couldn't tackle week one when I arrived, making big plays in games, tackles for loss and sacks. And then Oliver now being able to learn how to read an offensive line, and just do a lot of the fundamental things that he couldn't do when we first arrived. So I'm really proud to just be on this team at the moment and just helping them grow and helping them grow as individuals and helping the organization grow so we can have a long and prosperous journey together.
Amazing. Okay, how was that? How long was that?
2.5,
2 and a
minutes.
half. You nailed it. Good. You got a good sense. You got a good sense of time. All right. And how did you feel with that one?
I didn't practice that one, but that was just off the dome.
Yeah. How did it feel though when you were telling the story?
It felt a bit more natural.
Yeah.
It felt like I would the way I might regularly talk to someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think you nailed it.
Hmm.
I don't really have any constructive feedback for that answer. You did exactly what I told you to do in the last
Hmm.
question. You got right into like what was the challenge? What was my challenge? And then what did I do? And then of course other people are involved in the success, but it was very easy for me as the interviewer to see like how you lead, how you think about problem solving, how you think about uplifting others, a challenge you've overcome, where you've been a pioneer. So that was a
Hmm.
very revealing answer. And I think in terms of the four C's framework from the book, you pretty much nailed it. So
Awesome.
really, really good job. The only minor constructive, this is very, very minor. This is so minor. This is like taking it from an A plus to an A plus plus. The only minor thing is that I think you had actually finished the answer at 2 minutes, but you
Okay.
kept talking. You were
Yes.
like, and so then it was just all repetition from that point forward.
Yes.
And in a Stanford interview, it's fine. They're not
Hmm.
gonna punish you for that. Like a Harvard interview, you really don't want to do that in a Harvard interview. But in a Stanford interview, it's okay to be a little bit, repetitive at the end. However, I want to encourage you to have the confidence to just stop talking when you're done.
Yes.
Because you had told the story in 2 minutes and it was really done. And you could have just been like, yeah, I'm proud of
Hmm.
that. And then just stopped. So don't feel like you have to stop talking. Don't feel like you have to keep talking for any specific reason after you've answered the question. You can really just you can just
Hmm.
end the question. Okay, good job. All right. Tell me about a time you failed, Victor.
Okay. There's so many. Um, no, I'm joking. I think I want to talk about my first experience as an entrepreneur where I was starting a shoe reselling business. I started the shoe reselling business during the pandemic to actually support my family when we were facing a lot of financial hardships at the time. Like my grandmother had gotten laid off because of the pandemic and their remote working environment, and we were very stressed financially. And I had a few $100s to my name at the time, and I was trying. I decided that hey, I'm home now. I'm adding more expenses to my grandparents, so I'm going to find a way to contribute to the household. So I took the $200 that I had to myself and I invested in buying a pair of Air Jordans. And this first pair of Air Jordans that I bought lost me money. And in fact, my first couple of shoes that I bought just lost me a ton of money. And I realized the mistake that I was making in these early investments was that I was picking shoes based off of my intuitive understanding of like, oh, this shoe looks nice, or oh, this is the Jordan that's going to sell, but not necessarily doing enough of the research necessary to make an adequate and informed decision about which shoes I should actually buy, what's in demand at the moment. So from after maybe a month of probably losing 75 of the $200 I had to my name at the time, I revamped my entire approach. I joined Facebook groups to learn more about which shoes were selling at the time, and I learned that it wasn't only about the shoe; it's about the size of the sneaker as well. So different sneaker sizes that you wanted to buy to ensure that certain folks and different there were more people who were willing to buy this shoe, which increased the price of it. I also focused on expanding my social media brand for my company. So I started making more posts more frequently, taking better photos, looking at the photos other people posted for their businesses, seeing how I can take that model and framework itself, apply it to my business. And then also I figured I took my technical skill set and I built a sneaker bot that allowed me to buy some of these high-end sneakers that were really hard to buy manually, but using automation to buy them immediately on the drop. And through all of these changes that I made to my approach, I was able to go from losing a bunch of money in the beginning of my efforts to making over $5,000 in revenue over the course of 6 months of business operations at a 37% profit margin. And then I also was able to give a lot of that money back to my grandparents at the time to ensure that I was contributing to a lot of the bills and the groceries that we had during this pandemic. So I was really proud to not only have this entrepreneurial journey of failing and then revamping my approach, but also being able to give back and support my family at the time.
Excellent. You repeated yourself at the end there, but it was really short. I saw you
Yeah.
catching yourself. I
I
saw you catching yourself.
I've been trained to like re-summarize, and
Yeah.
I have to get out of that training that I've
Yeah, it's
been.
all right. This
Yeah.
was already an improvement. Every answer you're giving me is better than the one
Hmm.
before. So don't worry. You're doing great. You're doing great.
Hmm.
And a little like that was only like what 10 seconds summary, so it's not a problem.
Yeah.
First of all, that is an awesome story. Like,
Hmm.
I didn't realize that. I don't think I came across that when I was looking at your application. So I love that story. The sneaker bot. That's amazing. Um, I don't have a lot of constructive feedback for you here.
Hmm.
It's a great answer. So you set up the challenge of like, times were tough. I had to perform. I screwed up. That's the conflict, right? It's the failure.
Hmm.
I messed up. Then you showed all the different ways that you learn from your mistakes. You tried different things. You researched. You invented a bot. You did all the things. You turn it around. You succeeded, and you achieved your objective of contributing to your family. It's like the perfect narrative arc. So
Hmm.
that was an A plus plus answer. I don't have the only tiny
Okay.
thing. This isn't even constructive. This is like a could be nice to do this. Um, the sneaker resale market is a very, very small niche. The
Yes.
only reason I know about it is because I have friends who work at Nike. And
Hmm.
otherwise, I would never know about it. And my guess is that there's a strong chance that the AdCom person who's interviewing you may not know that there's
Right.
this whole aftermarket for like elite drop sneakers. So you might just give a little bit of extra context at the beginning.
That's a
And
great.
and you called it I think you called it a sneaker resale business.
Yes.
And so you say, I started a sneaker resale business, and if you don't know what that is, it's basically like anything. You buy something and hope that the price goes up, and then you sell it for more later, and you can apparently do that with, you know, elite sneakers. And so that's where I started, and then you just go from there.
Okay.
I mean, I was able to follow the story, and even if I hadn't known what sneaker resale was, I probably still could have followed the story. But I always think it's nice to when you have a really, really specific expertise that the person you're talking to may or may not know about, it's just kind to take a
Yes.
moment and be like, "Oh, let me bring you into this world of
Hmm.
mine here of sneaker sales. If you don't know about it, here's what it is."
Hmm.
Okay, great. That was awesome. You're doing really, really well here, Victor. Are there questions you're nervous about or concerned about?
I guess we can talk about like my why Stanford.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that question for sure in a minute. We're gonna get to
Hmm.
that question. The thing I want to say about behavioral questions, because if you look at the history of Stanford interviews, they're traditionally primarily behavioral. Tell me about a time you had to convince people of something. Tell me about a time you had to manage resources. Tell me about a time you overcame. So it's going to be these epic story style questions. And so as you're getting ready for the interview, the best things that you can do, because you've got the framework.
Mm-hmm.
You just proved that with the last two answers. Even the first answer, it was there. We just tweaked it a bit. So you know how to tell a story, and you probably already knew it. Like, one of the things I talk about a lot in the book is like, if you're human, you know how to tell a story. We're just showing you how to do it so that you can do it under pressure. So you know how
Mm-hmm.
to tell a story. You got the framework. So the best thing you can now is think about your story matrix, which is like, what are your greatest hits?
Okay.
And you already know what these are because you spent the whole last year writing your essays. You know, it's like, and you've told me, I think, three of them here, but you've got a lot more, like
Mm-hmm.
organizations you started, initiatives, your current business. Like, what are the six or seven really core, impactful achievements that you've had?
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that you've already talked about in this conversation, I think register. Those three were all really, really strong. And I know that you have others. So just think about what are those kind of five, six, seven most important stories that you might want to tell. And then spend a little bit of time reminiscing about the details. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
this sneaker story was so good right now because you remembered all the specific details. You remembered, like, I joined the Facebook groups and I did all this research, and the size was really important. I didn't know that. And then I created the sneaker bot. You see how it was very real, it was very vivid. There were a lot of details in it. It's like I could make a movie about that story. That's what you want for any story. And for the most part, we don't have all those details like top of mind. So your task really with respect to those behavioral questions is just to figure out what are the five, six, or seven kind of key stories I'm gonna probably want to lead with in the conversation, and then just reminisce about the details. And maybe while you're in the shower, you practice telling a story or two.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to memorize it. You doesn't seem like you're gonna have to write it down either. If you're gonna write it down, at most you write down bullet points, not don't write the whole thing out. But the best answers will be the ones that you improvise,
Mm-hmm.
but you want to have the details top of mind.
Okay.
And so that's what I would suggest with respect to the behavioral questions, which should make up the bulk of the conversation. And now we're going to talk about the goals and why Stanford. But um,
Mm-hmm.
I think you're doing great. I
Thank
think
you.
you're going to do really well with these behavioral questions.
I wanted to ask one last question. Well, another you said something I might be concerned with, but the question of like the time when you worked with a difficult teammate, I
Mm.
figured they will also ask that question, and I have a story to come
Hmm.
to mind, but I don't know if we have time or space to
Yeah,
just.
we could try it. Let's try it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't have a hard stop. I can go. We can
Okay.
keep going here. So let's try it. So tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult teammate.
I can think back to during my time in my master's at the University of West of England, where I was working in a group and we were building a robo advisor to help give to give low income investors personalized financial advice. And I was a product owner. I'd come up with the idea for this tool. And me being 23 years old and my master's at the time, I realized I was on a team with a lot of seasoned industry professionals. Most of the teammates I worked with have been working in the industry for 10 years and were well into their 30s and 40s. And as we began this project, we had outlined a specific product roadmap, specific guidelines, and delegated specific responsibilities within the team. And one day, as we were approaching a check-in, I noticed that there are a lot of changes to the code that I was developing for the actual financial model. And this code had more or less influenced other parts of the system. And I got a flurry of WhatsApp messages from my teammates saying, hey, what's going on with your code? It's messing this up. And from my diagnosis, I realized that one of my teammates, they had gone in and made changes to my section of the code. And this wasn't necessarily the first time that that we had a conversation about this. We'd spoken about delegating tasks, people doing what they were wanted to do, and if they were to make changes to other people's making changes to other people's parts of the project, we communicated about this. So it was something we set up in the beginning. I reached out to him and I just had a open and candid conversation with him about the changes that were made and how they influenced the rest of the team. And he communicated to me that he was facing a lot of pressure at work because his company was sponsoring his master's program to learn specific skill sets to learn specific skills to allow him to be better at his job. So that made him make these changes, because it was more or less about him trying to take initiative and doing extra stuff than him not respecting the boundaries of our team. And this is something I could really resonate with, because I understood we were all in his master's program to advance our own personal careers. Some of myself, I wanted to do entrepreneurship. He wanted to go back to his work and get a promotion or do something else. So recognizing that he had a natural interest in my work, I decided to take him under my wing, despite the fact he was much older than me. But I taught him a lot about the financial model itself, how I built the investment engine using modern portfolio theory, how I implemented the open banking technology to personalize the investment tools. And we took something that could have been something that divided he and I on the team, and it really became a great opportunity for he and I to grow our relationship and be able to learn from one another.
Nailed it. Nailed the ending.
Cool. I set up. I set up.
I saw it. I saw it happen. I
Yep.
saw you be like, mic drop.
Yep.
Okay. Congratulations, my friend. Very good.
Okay.
Great answer. No constructive feedback. I mean,
Okay.
perfect example, perfect execution, and also like a beautiful story. You
Hmm.
know, I can teach you how to shine up your stories a little bit, but I can't teach you how to actually be a good person. That you have to bring to the table already,
Hmm.
and you're doing that. I mean, you just have great stories, and that one's a blockbuster. I recommend you do your best to bring that one into the conversation because it shows maturity well beyond your years.
Hmm.
Honestly, there would be MBA students who might not approach that with as much magnanimity and compassion as you did. So it
Hmm.
really shows that you're mature, you have emotional intelligence, you're supportive of others, you're not territorial, you're not defensive, and you can really collaborate and be a team player. So that's a blockbuster story, that one. And really all the stories you've told today are great ones.
Hmm.
So if this was the interview, I think it's already going to be a yes from Stanford's perspective, both in terms of the content, the way you're communicating, what you're bringing to the table. You're doing really great. Um,
Thank you.
yeah. So let's talk about your goals in Stanford, shall we? So um, there's kind of a set of three different questions here. There's what are your goals? Why do you want an MBA? And why Stanford? And those three questions all work together. Historically, Stanford tends to ask, why do you want an MBA and or why Stanford? They tend not to drill down on the goals in the interview. However, that is still part of the conversation. So we'll just start with why do you want an MBA and we'll see where we get to from there. So uh
I have a, may I ask, with
yeah,
this answer,
absolutely.
should I approach it from a standpoint of answering like you said, why an MBA, but then also like connecting it to Stanford, or should I not give the connection to Stanford yet?
So I think it's always a good idea to be proactive and connect it to the school if
Okay.
that flows naturally for you. There are people
Hmm.
who will take it both ways. Some people do it this way, some people do it that way. It's not a right answer, but um, if you have a particular passion for Stanford, it would be
Yes.
natural, right? It would just be natural to be like, well, I don't want an MBA. Well, like, here's why Stanford. That's just
Hmm.
normal, right? You just flow into what you're excited to talk about. So just trust
Yes.
that instinct if it's there.
Okay, so why an MBA? My reason for pursuing an MBA, but especially the deferred MBA here at Stanford, is because at the moment I'm on this mission in life where I want to pay it forward to individuals who came from my community, potentially those who may have faced financial insecurity, housing and food insecurity like myself growing up. And I want to use my career and the privileges that academia and my professional life have given me so far to help other individuals access social mobility and be able to have more prosperous outcomes for themselves. And at the moment, I'm currently on this path towards trying to drive innovation in the ed tech space, specifically the education technology space. And in the ed tech space, I'm aspiring to use technology as a way to ensure that students from under-resourced academic contexts can still have a good shot at getting into university, especially in the context of recent events around castigations around DEI, as well as as well as some callings to dismantle the Department of Education. Some of these political implications right now put a lot of students from under resourced backgrounds at a great danger of being left out of higher education in the future. And I recognize that this journey in the ed tech space is more than about just building technology as using technology as a tool to create a resource for these students. It's about being able to work at the intersection of business, of government, and technology itself. And an MBA will help me gain those leadership skills where I can not only have a technical background to build the tools and resources I want to see in the world, but then also be able to be a leader who can effectively inspire other individuals to potentially join the cause, and then also be able to scale it in a way in which we can have impact on a national scale. So not only where we're so not in the sense where we're only influencing students locally, but we can help drive impact and ensure that students around the country can be able to access higher education. And I see the MBA at Stanford in particular being something that I want to pursue because of the school's great value on introspection. I feel like I'm very much connected to this cause of wanting to help these underrepresented communities because I come from them. And I realize that that's kind of my superpower in a sense where I'm equipped to help these communities because I have a unique insight coming from them. And I want to grow into a leader that doesn't necessarily lose those parts of their identity in their path of trying to enter these new white collar spaces to act in their pursuit of entering these new spaces. And the courses that Stanford offers, and at the moment I'm blanking on the professor's name, but he teaches a lot of courses. He teaches a lot of courses in the MBA program about how you can be a leader who brings your full self and your background into the business environment so that you can still be yourself while also being able to effectively navigate these spaces. I want to ensure that I grow into a business leader who can still relate to the communities that he comes from and the communities that he wants to help and the communities that he wants to help. And the Stanford MBA is the tool that's going to help me grow into a leader who still champions their own personal background, but also has the leadership skills and the technical and leadership know-how to actually implement and build the change that they want to see in the world.
Okay, very good.
I can't believe I
So,
blanked on that professor's name.
yeah, so remind me at the end of the conversation to show you a useful tool to remember things
Okay.
during the interview. But yeah, definitely look that guy up and have his name handy.
No,
But
it's a shame because I really like him.
but the fact that you breezed past it, you're like, I'm blanking on his name now. Let me keep going. That was actually awesome.
Yes.
Because a lot of what's happening in this conversation, it's like nobody's mind is a steel trap. You know, you forget things. It's a
Mhm,
conversation. There's a lot going on right now. So the fact that you had the confidence to be like, I'm blanking on it, but here's the deal and here's what's important to me. Again, it shows this level of professionalism and polish in a way that engenders confidence in your ability to
mhm.
hang in a Stanford classroom. So I thought that answer was really solid.
Okay.
There's a couple things that we could tweak and add to it, but I think um the core thing I want to say is that you are a candidate with conviction. That was where we started this conversation. Is that you are passionate about activism and you take your role very very seriously in all the activities that you pursue, and so this answer needed to have that same kind of fire and passion in it as you're talking about your vision, and it very much did.
Mhm,
So from my perspective, this was actually quite a strong answer.
mhm,
So if they were to drill down on, what exactly are your goals? So like what are you going to do in the time before you start Stanford, and what do you expect to do after Stanford? What
mhm.
would you say to those questions?
Absolutely. So during this deferral period, I aspire to build my ed tech platform and more or less, I aspire to build this ed tech platform to an pause. Should I go into details about the ed tech platform itself, or should I just, this is what I'm doing in the short term, this is what I want to do in the long term?
Um, I think it's okay to skip the details. You
Okay.
could give a few, but
Okay.
I think they'll ask follow-up questions. One thing I forgot to mention is that it frequently happens in behavioral interviews that they will have follow-up questions, that there will have been some specific things that they wanted to hear more about.
Okay.
And so they'll ask a follow-up question, and that is not a bad sign at all. You just roll with it. You just give them the answer.
Okay.
So if
Sorry.
they ask a follow-up like, "Oh, tell me more about the ed tech," that is very likely to be a question. And
Yep.
so you want to be prepared to do that, but you don't necessarily
Yes.
have to do that here. You can just give me a little bit of detail.
Okay. So may you ask the question again,
Yeah.
please?
So what are you going to do before your MBA, and then what do you imagine doing immediately after your MBA?
Absolutely. So I see what I want to do before and after my MBA as aligning with my vision of what the most important aspects of social mobility are, which I believe are educational equity and financial empowerment. So in the short term, I plan on building my ed tech platform and product to help ensure that high school students can get the adequate guidance about which classes to take throughout high school to give them the best chance of admission into their target universities. But then I see my own Stanford education and the leadership development that I hope to have at that time, and also taking advantage of some of the finance courses that Stanford offers, to then be able to leverage my own identity as a professional athlete to encourage other athletes to give back to their communities to give back to the communities that they care about. And this is something that I'm uniquely passionate about because I did a recent calculation, and if you were to take all of the contracts from NFL and NBA players, they'd rank actually about 100 in the world when it comes to nominal GDP. So athletes at the moment have a lot of buying power and a lot of financial power here in the United States, and we can potentially channel that economic power to be able to drive real change within a society. A lot of athletes are growing away from just being athletes themselves. They want to have strong personal images and to pursue other things outside of the court of the field. So I hope to be able to be a leader that creates mediums for other athletes to also be able to give back to the communities that they care about.
Very compelling. That's a very compelling answer. So, the one thing as I was listening to your first answer,
Yes.
the one opportunity that was feeling is the opportunity to be just a little more concrete,
Okay.
because you were talking big ideas. Like it was like, I'm going to champion this societal movement. I'm going to develop into a leader at Stanford. It was all kind of high level stuff,
Okay.
which is correct. Okay, so that is not wrong. And in fact, it was all very much aligned with the whole story you've been telling and with Stanford culture and what Stanford uniquely offers. So
Hmm.
it was not a weakness that you focused on those things in your initial answer. But what I was left with when I got to the end of listening to that, it was about a 4-minute answer of why Stanford, why an MBA. I was like, wait, what's he gonna do? Like, I just wasn't clear what your goals
Yeah.
were. And that's not, I didn't ask you the question about your goals. So
Hmm.
that, again, it's this, nothing had gone wrong. It's just maybe a missed opportunity because you are so concrete. Like, you do have such clear plans and a clear pathway that you're already pursuing. And then you have this vision, which I think is a really interesting vision. And
Hmm.
I think it was in this answer right here where you're telling me, like, athletes are, you know, the 100 ranking GDP in the world. Like, you're so knowledgeable, and also like you project a level of expertise and authority in that arena that is very compelling as an
Hmm.
MBA applicant. So I would say use this, like this thing that you just told me. So what you might do is you might just integrate that when they say why an MBA.
Hmm.
You might start with, well, here's what I'm doing now. Here's and I loved what you said. You said it the two, I'm gonna not say it the same way you said it. The two forms of um what did you say? It was educational equity and financial empowerment. It was like the two pillars of
Social mobility.
social mobility there. That's
Yes.
what you said, which I thought was brilliant. I love that framework. So you start with that and you say, this is kind of what my whole career is about. Right now, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm hoping to do in the next 2 years. I have a much bigger vision for later on, and it involves expanding education and financial empowerment. And then you get into the whole thing about athletes. And then you say,
Mm-hmm.
why I need an MBA and why Stanford is a couple of reasons. And in this answer, you talked about the finance education that Stanford provides, which I think
Yeah.
is valuable to include because it grounds it in like hard skills and the curriculum beyond the touchy feely, beyond the
Mm-hmm.
soul searching, which is critical. Like that's in essence what Stanford is all about. It's the container that they're providing for their students. So it was great that you included that, and then if you also add the hardcore finance piece, then it really shows like, okay, this person has really thought through like what are his strengths, what are his weaknesses, what's he bringing to the table, what can we Stanford uniquely add to make him more successful. It just shows um even more sort of like thoughtfulness about your
Yes.
future. Now, you have already studied finance. It's not like you don't know finance, but um given the goals that you have that are
Mm-hmm.
so far reaching and entrepreneurial, it's worth noting.
Yes.
So there might also be a piece of this answer where you say, well, I do see myself continuing an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial path in a few different directions.
Okay. So
Okay.
may so if I were to summarize your feedback about
Yeah.
how I would approach the
I
why.
really went around and around there, didn't I? Play
No,
it
no,
back to
no,
me.
no. I just want to make sure I have a full
Yeah,
understanding.
yeah.
So you're saying you liked my approach with how I said social mobility,
Mhm.
education, finance, and
Mhm.
then say in the short term I'm
Mhm.
doing X, Y, Z,
Mhm.
and in the long term I aspire to do one, two,
Mhm.
three. An
Mhm.
MBA will help me do
Mhm.
this in the long
I'm
term.
basically just dropping the second answer into the middle of the first answer.
Okay. Was I on the right track with my
You were on the right
breakdown?
track with all of it. But what
Okay.
happened when I asked you the second question is we uncovered a bunch of
Mhm.
stuff that I think is awesome and that I think that Stanford will find very compelling. And so I
Okay.
want to make sure that you stick it in so that they hear it. Because
Yes.
I asked that question of what are your goals? They might not ask that question.
Yeah.
And so if you don't bring it into the conversation, they will miss out on that
Okay.
awesome thing that you just said.
Okay. So then, yeah, like then, so after I talk about the financial empowerment, then I
Mhm.
bring it back to why the MBA and the specific offerings at Stanford that are going to prepare me to do what I want to do long term.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And you can play with the order like I'm just giving one suggestion because to me it,
Yeah.
it makes logical sense to do it that way, but main messages, bottom line, make sure they hear that story.
Okay.
Make sure they hear about your vision for being a role
Athletes.
model for athletes and championing
Yes.
a structured way for athletes to contribute and give back, because I
Awesome.
think that's awesome. And it's a visionary mission and
Mm-hmm.
one that you're uniquely positioned to fulfill, and that Stanford
Mm-hmm.
is uniquely positioned to help you fulfill. So it would just be a missed opportunity if that weren't part of the conversation.
Yes.
Have you prepared questions for the interviewer?
I have not. However, I do have questions that I have on the top of my head,
Mm.
but I haven't. Obviously, I've been more or less focused on getting these, getting my.
Getting yourself ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you're in excellent shape. I think
Okay.
all you want to do is go back and listen to the recording, gather any insights that you might have missed, reminisce about your greatest hits experiences, kind of practice that future question a couple times. You communicate really well naturally. You project a lot of
Mhm.
confidence, but also humility. You don't need to mess with your performance. The last
Mhm.
thing I want you to do is like nitpick yourself or like really like overdoing it, because then you'll remove some of that natural confidence and
Mhm.
humility from the message, which is very compelling. A lot of what they're judging in these interviews has nothing to do with your words. It's just like
Mhm.
your energy, like what kind of a person do you seem to be? And
Mhm.
you're coming across like very inspiring, very humble, very authentic, very compelling. And
Okay.
so If this were the interview, I think it would have gone well, honestly. I think you would
Thank
have
you.
gotten a yes coming out of this conversation. Even with the getting confused and forgetting the professor's name and a couple of ums and uhs, that stuff doesn't really matter in the end. It's just mostly like, who are you as a person? And am I,
Mhm.
as the interviewer, coming away with a clear understanding of that? And so
Yes.
from that perspective, this conversation was already a great success.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so I guess the thing I just wanted to first and foremost thank you for the compliments.
Mhm.
And just looping back to the beginning, when it comes to talk to my when it came to talking about myself, narrow down my answer. Don't
Mhm.
need to tell my whole life story.
Yeah.
And I just need to just set the tone. Just
Exactly.
here's
Yeah.
what I'm about.
So for that question, you do want to have the boundaries defined for yourself. You don't want to script it, okay? Don't memorize it, don't do that. But you want to have the boundaries defined because when you're talking, you're very compelling. There's nothing here that you have to fake or force. You're doing
Mhm,
awesome. So you just want to feel comfortable that in that first answer, you're going to give me the same impression that you gave me on the last answer in about 2 minutes. And so
mhm,
that's why that first answer, you want to have it bounded and then you want to practice it a couple times so that you feel confident that even if it goes off the rails and you
mhm,
start like rambling, it'll still be okay because you've figured out what you really want to convey in those first couple of
mhm.
minutes.
Actually, let's give that first. I'll stop being a wuss. You can I'll
All
stop
right,
being a
let's do
wuss.
it again. I
You
think
can
it'll
give
be
that first.
valuable. I think it'll be
Yeah.
good. All right. So
Okay.
so let's pretend we've never met. And Victor, why don't you start by just telling me about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for meeting today. My name is Victor Wright, and two of the most important parts of my identity are my passion for sports and my passion for activism. Sports is something that's been a very fundamental part of my life, and it really grew in importance for me when I was a kid. When I was 8 years old, my little sister was born, and when she arrived, I pretty much was thrusted into a second parental figure role for her. So I had a lot of responsibility at home, and athletics was really a way in which I could get out of more of a less a way in which I could get outside of the responsibilities that I had within the household and actually just enjoy being a kid and enjoy having fun. And that's something that has stuck with me now as I currently am a professional athlete playing football in Hungary. But on top of my passion for athletics, I'm someone who's also very passionate about activism. At 12 years old, I moved with my grandfather, and he gave me a reading list that I had to do every summer. And it involved readings from civil rights leaders, such as civil rights leaders and thought leaders like Michael Eric Dyson, James Baldwin, and Eddie Esquire Jr. And in all of these readings, the thing that I learned the most was that no change that's happened within our community has necessarily come from one individual person. It's all been about giving back to your community and paying it forward. And this is something that I've embodied within my own personal career. A lot of my efforts at Macalester were oriented around setting a positive example for what students, for what non-traditional students like myself can bring to the space. So I actively supported the administration in making the campus environment a more inclusive space for minority students following this university's decision to go test optional. I started multiple student organizations and affinity groups, and I ultimately graduated as the one of the most decorated student leaders in the past decade in Macalester, which according to at Macalester, where I earned a trifecta of leadership awards, the Kofi Annan Global Citizenship Award, Presidential Student Leadership Award, and the Ryder Cup. And this foundation, these innate leadership skills that I displayed at Macalester and now influencing where I'm headed into my own personal career, where I'm aspiring and currently building an ed tech product oriented around social entrepreneurship and ensuring that the next generation of students can have access to technology that allow them to continue to be competitive in the college admissions process. Huh?
Damn, I just got one word for that. How was that?
It felt better. It felt a
Yeah.
lot better, a lot more comfortable.
Yeah. The only thing I'm left with is like, what about empowering entrepreneurs? That piece was left out, and I think that's meaningful.
Mhm.
Um,
You said empowering entrepreneurs. What
yeah,
specific?
you there's an experience slivered between your collegiate experience and what you're doing now that you talked
Ah,
about.
yes, my first internship at the Do North Foundation.
Yes, I would include that because
Okay.
some of those they have your resume, so they've seen what you've done. But for me, the only thing that was missing here was, so you were a student leader and now you're an entrepreneur, and that is like a pioneer. That's like someone who's kind of like bootstrapping themselves,
Yes.
but you have spent time within structured organizations as well so
Yes.
far. And that just adds to your credibility as a candidate, but it also, I mean, the thing is, it's a whole rabbit hole, because there's, the equities that you're championing are most apparently lacking in some of those environments, and you definitely
Yes.
don't want to get into that in this part of the conversation. But I think mentioning those internships,
Hmm.
just mentioning it like you did in the other one,
Yes.
is also good to do. But
Okay.
if this was your answer, that was an A+. It was 2.5 minutes. It was
Hmm.
very clear. It showcased your passion, your excellence. It put everything forward in exactly the right way. So, and
Awesome.
and the fact that you made that up just now, like I gave you that outline an hour ago, and then you just made up the answer right now, that should give you great confidence that you are
Hmm.
ready for this interview, because if that was an improvised answer, then there shouldn't be anything they can throw at you that you're not going to be able to do well on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Really, really great. Thanks for watching. Please leave us a comment and give Victor like a cheers or a heart. Let him know that you're rooting for him. The entire MBA Protocol community, Victor, is rooting for you. I hope you all enjoyed getting to see this interview coaching session. Come back next week. We've got lots more cool stuff coming up on the channel.
Thank you, Angela. And if I can do anything, I will definitely say buy her book. It's awesome, and it's been a very, very, very good tool for me to help me learn and approach this interview process. So thank you, Angela. And for anyone else who's looking for advice, her book is definitely a great place to start.
Amazing. Thanks, Victor.